Everyone, welcome to the Clearwater River Watershed District AIS Forum for 2023. Thank you to all of you, the attendees and the speakers who've come together to learn from each other and to discuss the important topic of AIS management. I think all of us are aware that there is kind of a gap in aquatic invasive species management, and in so many places, Minnesota residents, lake associations have stepped in to fill that gap. So you're such an important part of the conversation, and we're really happy to have all of you here. We're really lucky, especially in the central Minnesota region of lakes, to have so much talent, intelligence, and drive in the folks who volunteer to serve these lake associations. I'm continuously impressed by their hard work to manage AIS in their respective lakes, their willingness to share with each other their knowledge. And without these people who dedicate their time, so many of us would not get to reap the benefits and enjoy the benefits of their work. And if we did, it would cost a lot more for those of us in government to really continue that work. It's these volunteers really provide a lot of value. So if you think about it, thank a lake association member today, and better yet, if you haven't joined your local lake association, you probably have one. So think about joining and maybe even volunteering. So again, I'm Rebecca. I'm the district administrator and engineer. I know many of you, so hello to everyone. Before I introduce the speakers, I want to give just a tiny update on the Clearwater River Watershed District AIS activities. Now, mostly for the vegetative aquatic invasive species and the mussels and things like that, we coordinate very closely with our lake associations to more be an administrator or a fiscal agent for your for just the funding portion, and then you guys do all the heavy lifting. But you may remember Dr. Shemek Bejer from Carp Solutions, who came and spoke to us last year about carp management. As of the spring of 2023, CRWD, in response to real heavy support from our and advocacy by our lake associations, our citizen advisory committee, and fully supported by the science, we've contracted with Carp Solutions to conduct studies in the Clearwater chain of lakes and in the Cedar chain of lakes to determine how can we more aggressively manage carp populations in district lakes to achieve water quality benefits. Now, while Clearwater River Watershed District has progressively used rough fish harvesting, migration barriers, and traps with some considerable success in the past, now it is the time to be more aggressive with these tactics and to determine if we can cost effectively manage rough fish in these lakes. So these studies specifically will quantify first how much biomass, how many pounds of carp are in these two chains of lakes. We'll identify spawning and migration patterns. We'll evaluate harvesting and control strategies, and all of this data will be pulled together to develop a more comprehensive and, like I said, aggressive plan to control carp cost effectively. Now, these projects will be funded by two water quality funds the district administers that were established a long time ago. We've worked very closely with the Lake Association, the representatives of the folks who are paying into these funds. There will be no increase in the levies. These will be covered by those two funds in their entirety. So over the course of the 2-year study, it will be covered by existing funds. Like I said, the work begins in 2023 and will wrap up in 2024. We will be, of course, sharing the final results, and we will work with Dr. Bejer to share interim results as they're available through social media, through websites, and certainly through just regular communications and ongoing communications with our lake associations. So there's that little update. We were having Commissioner Bertram join us. Olive or Christine, is Commissioner Bertram on the line?
Yes, he is.
I'd really like to thank Commissioner Bertram for joining us tonight. He's our New Stearns County Commissioner. I don't know if you guys saw his campaign, but he was very much a supporter and proponent of clean water. And really, he's shown up for us from the beginning at the district, just really reaching out proactively to board members and staff to, get involved and already, bring about some positive changes. So we'd like to thank him and then offer him, if you would introduce yourself to our lovely AIS Forum?
I'm wondering if he's having some issues.
Okay.
Sorry, this is the actual Christine talking. Sorry. I'm just wondering.
Christine, if you look at the chat, he
Yep, it says,
commented.
he asked if he can call in. Why don't you move on, Rebecca, and let me see if I can get him the call in, and then we can maybe give him a chance to talk at maybe after the county folks talk. Is that okay?
I know that he's got another engagement to go to as well. So let's just have him jump in when we get this figured out. And I will run through our speaker introduction and just a few other special call outs of folks that we have. I want to take a minute to say every forum that we've had representation from our county staff, the folks who are really actively administrating the funds. Ariana Richardson from Meeker County, who is the AIS coordinator, but also the 2023 chair of the Minnesota Invasive Species Advisory Committee. So not just local level, but higher level as well. Cole Lowen from Stearns County Environmental Services. Many of you know him as the former administrator and the founding person, I guess. He was the originator of the AIS Forum, joins us tonight. Alicia O'Hare, who's a water resource specialist for Wright County, also heavily involved with the decontamination stations and really doing a lot to further AIS. All three of them will give us a little, 5-minute or so update on what's happening in the counties. And then in addition to having the counties come in, because that's the source of funding for many of us in our work, we also like to invite the Lake Association members who really are doing the heavy lifting. We've got Paul Patsy from Clearwater Lake Property Owners Association. Many of you know this is our biggest lake in Clearwater River Watershed District. And this Lake Association has for decades been deeply involved and proactive in aquatic invasive species management, kicking it off with one of the first milfoil management projects. And they've just continued to really knock it out of the park in terms of how they've managed AIS. Bruce Hall from Clear Lake Property Owners Association, he's a biology teacher and comes to us with a great passion and has really been a solid driver of restoration practices in his own Clear Lake, not his own, but everybody's Clear Lake, where he lives. And they have a really fantastic and progressive program that they administer in a completely different way. And that they've had great success with it. We have Kurt Forrest, the Wright County COLA, who come to us and has this much broader experience of all of the lakes in Wright County. So welcome, Kurt. And then Henry Erdman and Jeff Forrester, they are from Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Advocates. I get to hear from them, quarterly or so at the MinCola meetings. MinCola is a coalition of lake associations in Minnesota from all over the state. These are, again, tons of really smart, talented, hardworking people who are dedicated to furthering the work that each of us as lake associations or staff or watershed districts is working on in terms of trying to make progress at the legislature. And they have a really keen pulse on what is happening legislatively, and they really bring a good eye to that. So I always find their updates are very informative. And then one more thing, I know just want to say, no, I can't see everybody who's on, but I do want to acknowledge the folks who have registered. We've got Clearwater River Watershed District board members, Dale Holmeth, such a gem to have on our board. He's a former DNR, kind of bigwig, so really understands both the science. He's local to the area and understands the area, has a long history and contacts. He's been a real benefit on the board. Dawn Cole from Cedar Lake, she's been just a tireless advocate. She asks the best questions, super dedicated board member. And then we have our newest board member, also from Clearwater Lake and also very active on the Lake Association, which is Brian Tomerdahl. Welcome, Brian. And I think I mentioned we've got Kathy Johnsrud, who has, I think, every year supported us with kind of brainstorming and coming up with a great list. She's usually the brainchild behind all of our fabulous speakers and also a member of MinCola, a very active member of MinCola. I think we had Mary Ellen Wells in the also a former board member. I know I can't see everybody now who's on here, so if I've missed you, I'm terribly sorry. Just, want you guys to know that we're grateful for everybody. And I'm gonna maybe check, did we fix things with Commissioner Bertram? Can Siava's?
While we're trying to figure this out, I just wanted to let everyone know, I just got a message from Minnesota Lakes and Rivers advocates, Henry Erdman and Jeff Forrester. And unfortunately, they were having an issue and will not be able to give an update, but they signed in to check in. They were having difficulties and won't be able to give an update, but I will add any information that I can to the website and Facebook afterwards.
Okay. I can also coordinate with Kathy Johnsrud and Mincola and kind of bring us maybe an update. I think they do have some really great insight, and I know that they're pretty dedicated to their meetings. So I hope we can hear from them, or we'll figure out a way to provide you the information. But that does leave us with more time for questions and answers. So Ariana, would you help us begin?
Here we go. Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay.
So a bit about our program. We are funded by, am I good to start?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So we're funded by State Prevention Aid. I was waiting for I just got slide control. Thanks. So we use our state prevention aid to provide services and I'm not sure what's up with that, but to provide services and resources that prevent and help reduce the risk of AIS spread. And we report on how we use our funds at the end of each year, and we publish a plan, which is available on our county webpage if anyone's interested. In the plan, we report on how we use our aid, but we also talk about how we meet all of our goals to fulfill the mission of preventing AIS. We do this by vetting best practices and research and data to prevent local spread, monitor for new infestations, and minimize the existing infestations that we already have. We minimize the existing infestations, my keys are so sensitive there, by providing a one-to-one match to community-led projects. So we have funded AIS treatment, signage, educational projects, and also inspection hours. So we have an inspection grant, which allows us to offer a decontamination unit at Lake Minibel 7 days a week. That's been critical to the success of our inspection program and slowing the spread of species like invasive zebra mussels. Since inspections are also our first line of outreach to the public, we've increased our training and support for inspectors as well. And we do partner with agencies and community organizations such as yourself for monitoring and sampling. We have increased the resources that we provide at the launches with our tool station project. I mentioned that to you guys. Last year, we shared a bit about it. We wrapped up our second year in 2022. And there is a guide coming out in 2023 so that if anyone's interested in putting these out at their own lake, they can do that. It was very cost effective. We got them put out for under $200 a piece. Also in 2023, we have 3 more advisory committee meetings. So if anyone's interested, they're open to the public. They're in May, August, and December, and they're held at the Meeker County Courthouse. We do sponsor AIS trivia and educational content with PBS Pioneer. So you may see our logo on some of the Prairie Sportsman shows when that airs. And there are AIS trainings that are going to be offered this summer, specifically to give some context for reporting invasive species, not just aquatic, but also terrestrial invasive species, and identifying different types of AIS, hands-on. We are also transitioning to a more equitable and holistic approach to AIS prevention in 2024. So that planning process is underway currently, and we're hoping to increase the amount of funding that we can provide for long-term control projects and move to a more a better model for cost sharing our inspections. So we don't just have 2 lake associations paying for it. We have a little bit more buy-in from the community as a whole. I look forward to sharing more with you guys next year. I think that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana. And then I think we have Commissioner Bertram all set. Before closing.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome, Commissioner.
Miracles happen. Thanks to my son Jacob. My wife and I were trying, yep, you'd give it to the 22-year-old. So I'm sorry, I could hear everything for what that's worth, and that's the most important part. I wanted to join, obviously, to make sure that I learn. Obviously, I have a lot to learn on a lot of these issues. I belong to a lake association, well over 30-some years, so I've been involved in that level, and I've joined a lot of the lake associations in my district and attended and will attend some of their meetings and everything. So between the watershed districts and the lake associations, I want to stay connected. You guys know a lot more about all this than I do, and so I'm going to need to have your help making sure that we do the best we can by all of our efforts. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I will listen. About 6:15, I'm going to need to leave. So I'll listen up to that part. And then Rebecca, you said you'd share some highlights with me beyond that. So thank you.
Yes, Commissioner, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll turn it over to Cole Lowen. Cole?
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Just waiting for control. Looks like I got it now. See if it will follow. Awesome. All right, here we go. So yeah, I'm just going to provide a real brief overview of the county's program. The Stearns County program, it's meant to prevent AIS spread by evaluating risk and implementing strategies to reduce that risk. We do that mainly by our partners, as Rebecca mentioned earlier. The county recognized a long time ago when the prevention aid came in that it's our existing partners that are closest to the AIS issues are the ones that need to be empowered by the county to address those issues. We do this with 6 categories in the county AIS plan. The 3 principal ones with the majority of the funding on an annual basis is on the screen. Besides those 3, there's also a set aside amount for program admin to help compensate the county for staff time, although it's nowhere near the amount necessary to compensate staff time. So that's the county's contribution into this program itself, as well as response and contingency reserve. The county sets aside budgets roughly $20,000 on an annual basis of funding to be available. So if there's a new infestation that comes into a water body, there's funding potentially available to try to get on top of containment before it becomes a larger problem, which we've had great success with. The program budget for 2023 is about $320,000 this year. 2 ways the county seeks to empower our partners. First is a standing AIS committee, and then we also provide grants to our partners. That standing committee is made up of stakeholders within the county that are interested in preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. And that committee, I like to think of it as it's the workhorse for the county's program. They advise and assist environmental service staff on all aspects of the program. A lot of the initiatives that are happening at the county right now, such as the high school fishing league outreach, that's the committee members that are taking that on and are volunteering the hours to see those initiatives forward. It's open to both lake associations and citizens at large. So if you're interested in serving on that committee, please reach out to environmental services to let us know you're interested. The other thing we do is a request for proposal process where we annually give out grants to our partners working on AIS issues. And that's open to other local governments, such as watershed districts, townships, cities, and our lake association partners. Now, that process is designed to ensure the funding is going to the partners' needs, while also ensuring the funding is being utilized within the confines of the county AIS plan. The process typically kicks off end of September Proposals are due in October, and then the awards are typically made in January. And then last year, we awarded a little more than $250,000, or roughly 80% of the total program budget, went out grants via that request for proposal process. One other initiative that we're excited about, we've been rolling out for well over a year now, is the 5-Star Initiative. It's a strategy created to create positive trust-based relationships between the shoreline property owners and lake service providers, or LSPs, that are operating while improving AIS prevention safeguards. How it works is the lake service providers that join, they commit to implementing a suite of common sense safeguards, and the lake associations that join us, the county, in promoting those 5-star lake service providers to shoreline property owners. And we do that through websites, social media, newsletters, mailings, meetings, events, etc. Clearwater Lake property owners recently joined the program, so thank you for that. Really glad to see you on board. We've also had several lake service providers join just recently that are active in the Clearwater River Watershed District, and I really hope we can count on today's attendees to join us in promoting 5-star. Finally, just want to mention, for more information, please go out to our website. We work hard to keep that up to date. There's lots of good information out there. Our 2022 report on the program is out there. If your association has provided its contact information to us in the past, you will receive regular updates on the AIS program throughout the year. You can be added to that mailing list. Just contact us, either direct email to environmental services, give us a call. We're always here to help, try to get you plugged in with anyone you need help with to further your AIS work. And again, we really appreciate our partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cole. Alicia, we're running a little bit behind, so I'm just going to turn it right over to you. Thanks, Alicia.
Sorry, I am muted and I'm talking forever. Anyway, I'm Alicia O'Hare. I'm the Water Resource Specialist for Wright Soil Water Conservation District, and we are the delegated authority for Wright County. Okay. So just a little bit about our program. In 2022, we had several aspects of our program. The largest component was our inspection program. We had just under 16,000 inspections and 7,000, just over 7,000 license plates that we encountered. This was, in fact, our best year ever for inspections per hour. So we really are trying to make each dollar count that goes into that program. We did 190 decontaminations last year. Our site is in Annandale. It is offsite and completely courtesy based. And you can look it up on Google. It's the Wright County Courtesy Decontamination site, and you can get directions. So I'll look for that. It will be open starting fishing opener from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week. We continued our bait compost program. We have 12 locations. And the first thing people say about bait compost is it's going to smell. No, it actually didn't. We really found that it doesn't smell as long as we keep the trash at bay, and we have some very dedicated volunteers that work on those bait compost stations to keep them maintained. So our plan is to continue that program going forward. So if you have live bait on any of those locations, just remember to dispose of them properly. And if there's a compost bin there, you use that. Our education program in 2022, we did the Prairie Sportsman along with Meeker County and several other counties for that educational show on PBS. And we also sponsored 2 AIS detectors, either one new detector and one maintaining their AIS detector certification. So we try to keep those specialists in our county and support them as they continue to go forward. For our treatment program, we gave about $52,000 in grants last year to 28 different lake associations. And that was what 2022 did for our programs. Just want to highlight our inspection program a little bit here. So in these areas, the circles that are large are where we did lots of inspections. And the ones that are dark is where we had high inspections per hour. So we had effective time management at those, all of those locations. So you can see how it's spread out. We did more ramps last year. Like we spread it out further in the county, but we concentrated the hours to just a few accesses. So there's only a few accesses that have big circles, but we found that that is really what helped us increase that inspections per hour. So that is something we are continuing into 2023. Okay, so for 2023, the treatment grants will be allocated on Monday. So lake associations can look forward to getting those letters that say, hey, look, we're going to help you with your treatment dollars. Bait compost, we will continue the program that we have. If anyone wants to start one, we can absolutely do that. We just have to construct a bin. Those are about $150 or so to do that. So if anybody's interested in adding a bait compost bin, we will consider that. Again, our inspection program will be concentrated to the 10 lakes that we have deemed the highest priority and highest risk. But all ramps will be eligible for some hours. So you may only get, 10 or 20 hours, but there'll be a presence all over the county. And we also have new priority hours this year. In previous years, our priority hours have been Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But what we found is that the evenings during the week are also a time when a lot of people go to the landing. So we are pushing our contractor to schedule inspectors from 5 p.m. until dusk during weekdays. And then also to increase the proportion of hours that occur during those priority times. So we're looking forward to see that. And as far as our decon program goes, help us get to 250 decontaminations, guys. We'll clean off your boat beforehand if you have zebra mussels left over from last year. Like I said, we open on May 13th. And then also one little plug that I forgot to stick in the slides is we are updating our AIS management plan this year, and we will be sending out a survey for priorities. Should only take about 5 minutes to do, but we'll have that ready later on in the month, and we'll be sure to share a link with the Watershed District and with the Wright County COLA to get public input on our management plan. So thank you for the time to talk about Wright County's AIS program.
Thank you, Alicia, so much. And thank you to Ariana and to Cole for joining us. Paul, tell us a little bit about Clearwater Lake and all the good work you've done.
Oh, you're
Paul, there we go. Paul, Patty, can you unmute yourself, please?
How's that? All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Patty, acting AIS manager and sitting board member for the Clearwater Lake Property Owners Association. We contracted with Blue Water Science for an AIS action plan in 2021 because of the AIS threats to Clearwater Lake. Half of our 3,200 acre lake is littoral with depths less than 15 feet and the potential to support vegetative growth. The action plan included water and lake sediment analysis for composition and chemistry in considering the potential for colonization and sustained growth of 6 selected non-native species, as well as treatment strategies for each. Water and sediment samples were collected in October of 2021 with a report in March of 2022. 25 lakebed samples were collected, with 23 from littoral areas and 2 from deep water sites, 1 each from the east and west basins. The 6 species of interest were blue-green algae and starry stonewort, neither of which have been found in Clearwater Lake, with curly leaf pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil, zebra mussels, and common carp known to be present. The tabulated data here on the right can be mapped as shown on the left of this slide and a few others that will follow. Plotting the data on a map of the lake using colored icons gives a visual perspective of risk for each sample site. Green represents low potential, yellow medium, and red high based on substrate concentrations in support of colonization and growth. In the first example, it is known that high phosphorus concentrations can provide for an abundant growth of blue-green algae. The presence of such a bloom has consequences not only in terms of water quality, but also health risks on recreational exposure. The 2 sources of phosphorus to Clearwater Lake are watershed water runoff and internal phosphorus loading to the lake bed over many years. The watershed loading of phosphorus has been significantly reduced by the changing agricultural, industrial, and residential practices, especially in the use of fertilizers. A predicted risk of phosphorus release from the lake bed can be graded as low, medium, or high based on the ratio of measured iron and phosphorus. In general, the higher the iron content, the greater the iron to phosphate ratio, and the lower the risk for phosphorus release. As a reference, the ratio at or above 15:1 is the tipping point where the risk for phosphorus release would be near 0. Here is the analysis of starry stonewort's potential based on nutrient concentrations that differ from those in support of blue-green algae blooms. The same can be done for the potential of curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil. Because of limited time, I'll pass through the next few slides quickly, showing, in this case, the nutrient support for the growth of curly leaf. And here is the one for Eurasian water milfoil. Bringing all the information together, a graphic profile can be constructed for Clearwater, plotting the likelihood of a non-native species taking up residence and what impact that might have on the ecology and recreational use of the lake. Fortunately, looking at the plotted species, much of what was studied fell into the low to moderate risk range, with none projected as being of high risk. The predictive value of a report like this is only as good as the attention paid to what it tells us and how we respond. The AIS action plan can help guide members of the Lake Association in the allocation of resources and targeting areas of risk, and most importantly, coupling that with a management response when a threat is identified. This slide shows the targeting plan for the detection of starry stonewort at 7 of Clearwater's boat landing sites, incorporating both dive and rake tosses. Boat ramp inspections will continue to be supported by the CLPO for their strategic importance, but with growing concern over escalating costs, fewer contractors participating in the RFP, and a perception that we have at the ramp perhaps inspectors of lesser quality. I show this slide again after circling landing site number 5 in red as perhaps the only landing site of the 7 with sufficient nutrients for a heavy growth of starry stonewort as measured in the survey. Given the limited number of survey sites and potential for sampling error, however, all the ramps are known to be at risk for not only the introduction of starry stonewort, but a level of infestation as well. The battle we wage against AIS is time-consuming and expensive. It's very expensive. The design and execution of a strategic commitment is not only the responsibility of the CLPO, but all other supporting state agencies as we go about the business of AIS management. The study I presented here is but a snapshot in time of a very dynamic ecosystem. As such, it certainly has its limitations. Putting aside the effect time alone can have on measures or outcomes, one can wonder about the impact of other dynamics. For example, the iron phosphorus ratio predicting the release of phosphates is interesting, but how does that compare to the impact of percussion waves hitting the lake bed from wakeboard boats? What impact, if any, does a pontoon boat propeller have in tilling up the lake bed? At what concentration of phosphorus do we need to be concerned about not only blue-green algae, but the rapid growth of both native and non-native plant species? Certainly, there are more questions and studies to follow, many of which I'm sure are already in process. Lastly, in promoting what the CLPO does on Clearwater Lake, I've printed the first page of our spring newsletter, which will be available on our website in the next few weeks. As editor of the newsletter, I wanted to bring attention to some of its content. One article in particular tries to answer a question frequently asked by our property owners, which is, during times of drought, why don't we use the dams to adjust water levels by reducing the amount of water passing into the Mississippi River? Good question for which I didn't have an answer until now. So check out our newsletter. And with that, my time is up. I want to thank everyone for logging into this year's forum. I also want to apologize to all the attendees that because of a prior commitment, I need to leave the meeting. Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much for giving that great presentation. We really enjoyed hearing it. I'll move on to Bruce Hall from the Clear Lake Property Owners Association, also a member of our CAC.
Went too far. Hi there. Good evening. My name is Bruce Hall. I'm a member of the Clear Lake Property Owners Association. I'm also with the Watkins Sportsman's Club. I live on Clear Lake. We are the head of the watershed for the Clearwater River Watershed District. We have our lake is about 550 acres in total, of which about half is littoral acreage. And honestly, most of that half, if not more, we have coverage of Eurasian water milfoil and curly leaf pondweed. Thankfully, we do not have common carp. Many years ago, in 1970s, Rotenone took out the carp, and because we are the head of the watershed and able to manage the tributaries coming into the lake, we haven't had a return of common carp. And we have not yet seen any other fauna like zebra mussels, and we are afraid that one day we may get starry stonewort, because Lake Coronis down the road has it to a large extent, and that's kind of one of our fears. But we do currently manage our curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil by mechanical removal, and we've done that kind of by hook and by crook. I came out of this Lake Association about 8 years ago, and the Lake Association had already been intensively managing the lake, mainly by chemical treatments on a yearly basis, and trying a variety of new chemical treatments as they came about, and we were able to get permitted to work with them. Unfortunately, we kept finding that as we killed off curly leaf pondweed and starry stonewort, or curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil by chemical treatments, we were only getting a portion of that treated chemically, and it was also taking out the native vegetation with it. And what we had returning after it died off was algae growth. And it was one of those concerns that we decided, after about 15 years of chemical management, up to using 70 grand worth of money to treat chemically, we decided we had to try something different. So we looked into commercial management by a harvester. And you can kind of see in this one, we don't obviously, this one is one of those that does work down south on water hyacinth. We don't use that on any of our pondweed or anything like that. It's only sub-emergent vegetation. And I'll bring that slide up here. So our harvester is called the Eco Harbor. It's made by Silver Mist Inc., which is a company that builds it in Wisconsin. It's sold locally by Weeder's Digest in Plymouth, Minnesota. This is kind of the only location we found that's geographically nearby to purchase this equipment. And back in 2018, when we bought our eco harvester that we have now, it was about 90 grand for that purchase. Thankfully, Meeker County helped us with some of that through grants. Watkins Bank was grateful enough to give us, we were grateful that they gave us a loan. The local sportsman's club gave us another loan, and we paid it all off in a couple of years, thankfully, because our membership is pretty involved. And so that helped out a lot, but it's pretty expensive. As Paul said, AIS management, regardless of what you do, is expensive. But when you're throwing out 70 grand a year for 1 year's chemical management, and it all comes back again the following year, it's problematic. So this is trying something a little bit different. We've been doing this now for about 4 years. This will be our 5th year. The eco harvester that we have holds about 3 cubic yards of harvested vegetation in its bunk, which is about 4,000 pounds that we can pick at one time. It only manages basically submergent vegetation, but it operates closely into shore if we need to. It can go operate as little as 1 foot. It's a heavy machine. It's on pontoons, but it'll operate as little as 1 foot of water, and it has dual paddle wheels, which allow it to turn very tightly. So you can pretty much turn on a dime with it, which is nice. It operates very easily. We pull aquatic vegetation from the substrate by the roots. We're not a cutter. You've probably heard that in the past years, some of the machines that do cutting of AIS has come under fire. Some of it, like Lake Minnetonka, even had their lake association was sued and successfully, because they found their cutting machines were basically just moving the AIS around. This one, we investigated, it basically pulls it up by the roots, but only typically more of the mature plants. Now, if you know Eurasian water milfoil, it's very wiry, so that's pretty easy to pull up by the roots. Curly pondweed, when it's young, we find that more often than not in late May, we're kind of mowing the lawn. We're taking the tops off. But later on, as the plant matures, we're able to pull it up. The eco harvester is best if operated by 2 persons, but one can operate it successfully. We use it in conjunction with a lift trailer where we can put a 1 large load or 2 smaller loads into the lift trailer when we offload. It's done that hydraulically. It's pretty easy to use. And then our removed vegetation, we field apply now as green manure. In the past, we've also supplied it to St. Cloud State University for powering some of their digester on campus, which has been kind of nice. Okay, so 4 years we've been removing. We've got basically a 10-year project we'd like to use this machine on. And as I said, we spent 15 years doing chemical management. Prior to that, last year we took out 125,000 pounds or 63 tons of curly pondweed and about 144 tons of Eurasian water milfoil that we took out of the lake and composted. The big part of that is that we took it out of the lake, and it is pretty specific to what it takes out. We're not getting a lot of non-target species involved in there at all. And what we remove from the lake does not die off and come back at us as LJ, which is significant for us. We are finding that our operation costs are about $100 per hour. I kind of transpose this. Should be about $100 per hour for curly pondweed and $125 for Eurasian water milfoil. Curly pondweed is a lot thicker. It's quicker to remove. We do pay, or have paid in the last couple of years, $20 per hour for paid workers to help us remove it. And we have to train them on the eco harvester. We find that it's easy. It's nice to be able to keep the eco harvester on the water after our initial launch. We don't have to clean it between launches, and it saves us a lot of time. So we basically keep it on a local dock, and our workers are able to go right to that dock and keep it going, and then they'll go to an access to offload when they need to. We are starting now after 4 years to see some positive competition as we take the canopy of exotics off the top of the native vegetation and the substrates. We're seeing natives come back, which is nice, especially pioneer species. We're also seeing now that it tends to come back more in hard bottom or sandy bottom substrates, where we're seeing a lot of the natives that you see there coming back. And they're existing, they're coming back and staying coming back, where we don't have to start going back to those areas now and remove AIS. That's just kind of a new circumstance in the last couple of years. And we're finding that the natives are outcompeting the AIS in certain hard bottomed areas. Our goal here is to try to do a 10-year operation of mechanical removal as a trial period. We would like to remove 500,000 pounds sustainably for 3 years and see where that gets us. But our target areas are these: boat landings and fishing pier area. We have a well-used fishing pier on the south side of the lake that we get a lot of use on, so we try to keep that well cleaned out around that area. Obviously, the main areas are littoral recreational use of the lake, but we see here Curly Pond, we growing as deep as 17 feet of water, 18 feet of water, which is almost the maximum depth of the lake. So it seems to be growing out into the deeper parts of the lake, and maybe that's as we see clear water coming back, it's starting to root deeper. We also make sure we clean out group lake resident cleared channels to get everybody out to access to the main lake area with their boats. We have a separate operation where we do shoreline maintenance or AIS, and we do that in conjunction with Meeker County. And we basically do that by chemical treatments. And that's been a pretty successful shoreline maintenance program over the last several years as well. So the bottom line is we try to get the canopy of the AIS off, that we see that that's allowed some resurgence of natives, which we're trying to do. We're saving ourselves, we hope, a lot of problems on management of our LJ growth when we take those plants out. We're also hoping that over time, and again, it's a time honored thing, we're seeing less regrowth from seed of Eurasian water milfoil, and we're seeing less curly pondweed turions in our lake substrate. As you probably know, they can take a long time in the substrate. They can come back over a lot of years. So the more we remove before the plants go to seed, the less come back year after year. And we are seeing some of that take place now. Problems we have with some of this operation yet is that the eco harvester has a short time warranty on both parts and the engine. We suggest that a 25 horse engine is probably the better engine for the machine. Right now we have a 12 horse engine. Causes a lot of agitation, which puts a lot of stress on moving parts and electrical connections. So we're lucky enough to have an on-call mechanic that works with us, and we've all kind of become mechanics on our own machine over the years. Also had a problem with a aluminum gas tank that during hot weather caused a lot of condensation that became problematic for our operation of the machine. Maintenance costs we're running this from about $2,000 to $5,000 per year. The engine life has been about 5 years, we think, on this eco harvester. One of the problems you need to come up with is an easy and quick and permanent disposal methods for removed AIS that needs to be fairly nearby, so you're not having to move it on down the road. And then come up with some means of mapping and GIS systems to document removal for grant recovery, and also for the power lift trailer and vehicle access to haul it. You got to have some vehicles that can move the machine. This last here, I'll put that up again. This is Clear Lake, and this is the beds that you're seeing are about mid to late June curly pondweed growth on the lake right after it's flowered before turions are set down. And you can kind of see that most of the littoral acreage is pretty much covered. This was a photo taken several years ago. It's gotten better since this photo is taken, but we know that we're probably in the business of not ARS eradication, but AIS management for the long term. And that's kind of the goal that we're at. We know we're spending a lot less than we were when we were chemically managing the lake. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. These have all been excellent presentations. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of great questions. There was a similar project in Sauk River Watershed District where the Lake Association employed a harvester with really great results. So I'm really hoping that this works out for you. The Clear Lake project, just to interrupt for 1 second, is funded differently than our other AIS projects where the district is the fiscal agent. And here, in this case, the Lake Association does everything, soup to nuts. I mean, we're here to support them if we can, but they really carry all of the water in this case. So it's another model and another way to do things. So thank you, Bruce. Kurt. Are you set to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's hear from Kurt. Thank you so
Oh.
much.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kurt Forrest, president of the Wright County Coalition of Lakes, and I thank the folks there for inviting me to speak this evening. There is some commonalities in AIS management, and you're going to hear me repeat a little bit of what Alicia and Bruce have both said, but in a little different take on things. But I want to take you on a journey tonight. We're going to talk about some strategies, visit about two of the most overlooked AIS species that we have here in central Minnesota, being the common carp and curly pondweed, although as we just heard from Bruce, some lakes are very familiar with it. And then I'm going to conclude with two samples, studies that will look into the carp situation and tie that into the 12-mile Creek watershed and its headwaters of Howard Lake in southern Wright County. So chemical treatment for curly pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil have become pretty much the norm here in Wright County. Obviously, the mechanical harvester has been used. Different lakes have different success with either or both ways of managing. Depending on the size of the lake, the harvester may be a little more expensive than chemicals. Both respond to the water chemistry differently, so it's kind of a give and take, but both are used, obviously. Zebra mussels have been monitored with micromesh nets, stacked plates, and inspection of docks and boat lifts that are removed in the fall season. The majority of the Wright County Lake Association use tools from the Soil and Water Conservation Toolbox, which some of which Alicia has already pointed out. But this has really been helpful to us in aiding our treatment and preventing AIS in the county. Now, the county does provide, as mentioned, a robust boat landing inspection program, providing X number of inspector hours at the landings, but the associations can purchase more hours if they feel that it's warranted for their lake or number of landings that they may have. Some of the Wright County lakes in watershed districts, for example, or with special interests like those with starry stonewort, have AIS prevention plans that go beyond the normal workings of the toolbox. For example, lakes with a history of starry stonewort or zebra mussels, they've got divers to hand harvest remaining specimens to ensure that the invasives have been contained or truly minimized. The Soil and Water Conservation District also provides funding from grants for AIS control, plus the delineation and point intercept studies that are required by DNR to obtain the permits. And then we have the free boat decontamination station available, which is a real boon to we believe Wright County. It's being used more every year. I think when we first used it in 2017, we had the most use. But then COVID hit and things, and it's been down a bit, but every year it seems to be coming back up to that range again. The lake associations have partnered with Soil and Water in public AIS education, such as the Clean, Drain, and Dry program. And then we participate in the Stony Trek search every late summer. The Soil and Water has also provided scholarships for the U of M's Extension AIS detector program, and we now have 3 certified AIS detectors in the county. And there are also the CD3 stations. There was a cost sharing plan that was used to purchase these stations. There will be 5 of these boat cleaning stations operating in Wright County this summer. Now, each body of water is unique, as we all know, and we need to consider different approaches when treating the same AIS species. And I want to illustrate this this evening with examples from 2 carp studies, and then tie it together with the Wright County Soil and Water 12 Mile Creek Watershed Program. The first of these is a 2015 paper from Drs. Rozier and Sorensen from Macer, and they studied Lake Susan, which is a stratified lake in Carver County, where they reduced the carp population from 300 down to 40 kilograms per hectare. They recorded the phosphorus levels in the spring and summer, and before and after the carp was removed. And following carp reduction, there was an increase in the aquatic vegetation and the water clarity, with a decrease in springtime chlorophyll with increased clarity. However, these findings did not carry over into the summer months. That is, there was a repeat of the same old summer story of increased chlorophyll, decreased clarity, AKA algal blooms, which suggested that carp removal had no apparent effect on the total phosphorus in that stratified lake. The conclusion was carp played a minor role in the phosphorus budget compared to abiotic internal loadings. The second example I'd like to use is from Lino Lakes. This is a watershed. It's basically a wetland of shallow lakes connected by the Rice Creek. There is one larger lake in the system, that's Long Lake, where work was done to improve its water quality for recreational purposes. The resulting TMDL, the phosphorus standard was met, but not the chlorophyll nor the clarity. And then a carp project was done with the Sorensen's team, and carp were tagged and followed via telemetry. They found that the carp migrated several miles into the wetlands along the Rice Creek. They summered upstream and then returned back to Long Lake in the winter, which is kind of the aquatic equivalent to our snowbirds going south for the winter. But the carp population was then reduced by mechanical trapping from 700 micrograms down to less than 100 micrograms per hectare, after which all the parameters, phosphorus, chlorophyll, and clarity were met. So 12 Mile Creek is, bring that up here. The 12 Mile Creek watershed has components of both of these examples. In pink, you'll notice the larger recreational lakes within the watershed, and they're all connected by 12 Mile Creek. Howard Lake at the top of the watershed, and then Ann and Little Waverly are all impaired lakes. And because of this, the Wright County Soil and Water Conservation District was able to receive a grant to improve the water quality in this watershed. One consideration at the time was carp removal. And it has been suggested that carp removal with the new technologies that we've talked about today, the tagging and mapping and migration routes, may actually be less costly than other methods used to control phosphorus loading. So last year, the carp in the district, the watershed there, were tagged with microchips and population and biomass density was estimated by electrofishing. And we can see here with Lake Ann at the top, had the most carp, fairly similar in size range, then on down to the deeper lakes of Mary and Waverly, where the carp population is less. So what was found is that the shallower eutrophic lakes of Ann and Waverly, Little Waverly, I'm sorry, are similar to the scenario of the Rice Creek program and had the greatest carp biomass, as we see here in this table. After monitoring migratory routes and spawning areas this summer, it may be found that the carp removal is the best management strategy and the most cost-effective method for these two lakes. The deeper lakes of Waverly and Mary are mesotrophic in nature and have carp biomass less than 100 kilograms per hectare and will not be needed as considered for carp removal. Somewhere in between these is Howard Lake, which is a stratified lake within the shallow lake watershed. And it has an average depth of 16 foot. And again, the biomass of carp is 110 kilograms of carp per hectare. Is at the lower end of things where it's known to be less damaging to vegetation, but still a consideration. But I want to, before we get into that, I would like to dive a little deeper into Howard Lake, actually a little shallower, as we look at the littoral zone and the influence that curly leaf has on Howard Lake. But for the record, and from earlier discussion this evening, and checking the EDD maps of the Midwest website, only 10 lakes in Wright County have been listed as having curly leaf pondweed. None of these are the lakes of 12 Mile Creek watershed. But as we see here in Howard, it's fairly extensive. The point intercepts surveys in June of '06 and then repeated last year showed that curly leaf made up on the average of about 20% of the littoral zone. However, for us, the curly leaf has never really been on our treatment radar for a couple of reasons, cost among one, the other that, as we all know, it comes up and it's kind of a nuisance until the end of June and then it goes away. But as we'll find out here, that the effects of it really does not go away. Because last year, the density was determined along with the point intercept survey, and the phosphorus content was calculated then from this estimated biomass. And the results showed that curly leaf pondweed contributed 21% of the total phosphorus budget to the lake and 42% of the phosphorus contributing to the internal loading. So we've looked at the carp situation, we've talked about the curly leaf problem and the amount of phosphorus that it returns to the lake. So what would be the best management practice for Howard Lake? Do we do carp removal? Do we treat the curly leaf pondweed? Or maybe look at both? Well, if we look back at the studies of Bejur and Sorensen, we can conclude that carp play only a minor role in the phosphorus budget in the stratified lake. While in the Rice Creek model, it showed that even when PMDL was met, clarity and chlorophyll did not change until the carp were removed. Now, carp removal would affect the overall health of Howard Lake by decreasing the sediment load, increasing flora and fauna, and improving the fisheries. However, when Curly Lake Pondweed contributes up to 27% of the total phosphorus budget and greater than 50% of its internal load, management really must be seriously considered. Now, some final thoughts. AIS management needs to be part of a program and not just a selected individual or independent project. The AIS strategies need to be revisited, as my examples today point out, that there is not one size fit all solution. And as research and technology advance, what worked in the past may not be the best solution today. The AIS program being carried out in the 12-mile creek watershed incorporates many of the aspects of a lake's health within a watershed. The AIS impacts the biology welfare of lake waters as well as the economics of a local community, both or all of which merits equal consideration. So with those thoughts, I thank you for inviting me and your time tonight. That's all.
Oh, Kurt, Bruce, Paul, you guys really did a great job for sure. Ariana, Cole, Alicia, you always do a good job. We've heard a lot of really compelling stories and a lot of really good information. I'm sure people have questions. I've seen some great ideas in the chat. I've been taking notes about things Clearwater can maybe do to really support AIS management in partnership with our, county, SWCD, and Lake Association partners. So as anybody, I'm seeing, maybe really pushing out some information through some of the channels that we have available to us and our partners about where the decontamination stations are. So I've taken that note. Does anybody, I guess at this point, we'll just open it up to questions. So you could either type them in the chat to the right or ask them. We still have most of our speakers on, and if not, we're watershed staff is also here, and I think we've still got our county staff, or many of them here. So
This is Kurt. Is Alicia, are you still here?
I think Alicia had to sign off. Oh no, she's
I'm here.
here.
Okay. Did you, there's a question about location of our decontamination station?
Yeah, I saw a couple of locations in or questions in the chat about potentially doing signage at some locations. And it is certainly possible, and it could increase usage. We would just have to talk with the access owners on what they would allow, and then determine the cost associated with each of those. Currently, what we do now is we provide business cards that have the date and the dates that it's open, the times, and the address, so people can easily have something in their pocket that can get them to the decontamination location. But we can look into getting some look into what it would take to put up signage.
And then the business cards, I believe, are handed out at the decontamination station for, again, people's future reference.
The inspectors give them out at the accesses. And we have inspectors at most of the locations that have zebra mussels in the county. Not quite all of them, but most of the heavily used accesses, we have quite a good inspector presence for those locations. Both of the Starry Stonewort Lakes are heavily inspected as well.
Thank you, Kurt and Alicia. Any other questions for our speakers or staff or suggestions? Or some primers? What gives you a lot of heartburn about aquatic invasive species management on your own lakes? Yeah, and if we don't have questions too, we can sign off early.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm Mary Ellen Nichols from Waverly Lake, and we talked about what to do to stop when the weeds or aquatic invasive species is in the lake, but what can we do to prevent them from even coming in? I mean, I know like our Right Soil and Water works really closely with the farmers to try to prevent the runoff, but it seems if we could do more, and they are doing things, but to even prevent even the aquatic invasive species to grow or change the environment in the water so they can grow.
Alicia, do you want to take?
I know the research center, the AIS Research Center at the U of M is looking into some biogenetic treatment options for like carp and zebra mussels, for example. Those are still quite a few years out. But as far as other prevention methods, it's really about, education and trying to get people to do the right thing. And I saw Ariana might have had her hand up, so maybe she has something to say about it.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in. I think Mary Ellen's question and a point that Kurt made earlier really get, I think, tied together because when you think about like what you can do to prevent invasive species from really establishing in your lake, obviously, like Alicia said, the big thing is just keeping them from getting introduced. But if your lakes are healthy, like obviously this isn't going to prevent it entirely, but the healthier your lake is with respect to the nutrients in your lake, the less suitable it is for when you do treat for invasives for those to rebound as hard as they do in some lakes that are really imbalanced. So I would say if you guys are thinking about, the minimal invasives that you do have, if you don't have very many or trying to prevent them from getting established, focus on your water quality before you move to chemicals as an answer or pulling as an answer. Like really address why they're growing so well, and then get involved. Like Alicia and Cole and myself, if you have questions about how to participate in prevention efforts in the county, like we can more than likely point you in a direction of someone else that's doing work to get involved with. But even just having folks trained as AIS detectors is really helpful. And then getting permission to, be in your launches and do education. Obviously you want to clear that with whoever your county coordinator is, but there's a lot more that you can do other than just wait for them to come and treat once they come. So I don't want people to feel hopeless on that respect. Like, yes, the farming tiling is an issue, and because of the way legislation has worked out through the years, that's a bit more challenging to address, but you guys are doing really great work at your lakes. So that water quality portion is super important.
Yeah, thank you. And Right Soil does a great job working with the farmers around Waverly Lake, because it seems like that's the main cause of the problem, and there's not strong legislation to prevent a lot of things. And we need farmers. We need farmers because they grow our food and we have to eat, but yet there's not many rules or regulations about them contaminating or having runoff into our lake. So that's what kind of gets me frustrated. And again, our Right Soil and Water does a great job working with farmers. They've done tremendous things we put water instead of the control basins around our lake. They're doing cover crops. They're doing a lot to try to minimize the effect, but it just seems we spend a lot of money on chemicals, but yet the farm runoff keeps happening. It's just a frustration of mine. That's it. Thank you.
Could I interject myself on that comment for a point of clarity?
Yes.
I do a great deal of farming myself, and the regulations that we see now over the last 8 to 10 years are at significant levels. The things that we have to do now within the field to control runoff, most of it is very reasonable. It's working. We're seeing that in terms of the results after spring runoffs, that we're having less and less flow into the watershed regions. So just a little bit of clarity there. Farmers are working really hard, and I don't think that was the judgment, but there are plenty of laws and regulations in place to put in best practices.
I agree. There a lot has been done, and again, our right soil and water works really well with the farmers around our lake to try to minimize the runoff in our lake.
Kurt?
Yes, I just kind of interject the point of nutrients in the lakes, and that's why I mentioned and spent a little bit of time with the curly leaf pondweed, as well as I'm glad Bruce did the bit with the harvester and the amount there in that area. But it was really an eye opener to me to see how much phosphorus ended up going back into the water from the curly leaf decay. Everybody knows that we get a huge algae bloom about 2 or 3 weeks into July. Everybody blames the hot weather and the temperatures, which have part to do with it, but it's all that phosphorus being released, a lot of it by the curly leaf. And again, I don't, people don't even consider it an invasive. It's so prevalent, and as I mentioned, it's only listed on 10 lakes in Wright County. And I know I'm not a betting person, but I'd almost bet my oldest daughter that every lake or almost every lake in Wright County has curly leaf. So it's something that's just taken for granted. But just because it's been around for a long time, that doesn't mean it still isn't causing problems. And that's one reason why, again, I think that we need to turn our attention to some of this not so exotic stuff, but consider what has always been there. That and the carp can play a major role in the health of the lakes in general.
Thank you, Kurt and Mary Ellen. Anyone else have some questions or feedback?
Rebecca?
Kathy, hello.
Yes, good evening. Just to shift gears a little bit, the Wright County Coalition of Lake Associations really recently sent out information about a piece of legislation that has all of our hearts and minds interested. It has a Senate and a House bill for mandatory boater education. This is a piece of legislation that has been worked on for many years by many organizations. And one of the neat things about it is that it does have some Minnesota specific AIS education as part of the package for the boaters education. So again, you may have seen information on various channels, but this year that piece of legislation does have legs in both the House and the Senate. And if anybody wants further information, Wright County COLA has a really good several pieces of collateral that we would be happy to share about information on those two pieces of legislation in the House and the Senate.
Thank you, Kathy. That's some of the work by MinCola as well as supported a lot of that work. So it's great to see some of some of those measures really moving forward. Do we have any other questions or comments? I think, we're really hoping to just listen here and take some notes to see how we can support everyone's goals of clean lakes. So we've seen comments that they love the bait compost. That's great. Okay, well, we will be posting this online. So if people didn't get a chance, or if there's something you'd like to go back to, we're absolutely going to post it. Please feel free to reach out to me or to Christine if you have questions. And I know the county staff is also really willing to answer questions. And Mary Ellen, partially your question about how do you get involved, how do you, those lake associations that are so effective and so active around the lakes, those are really great places to start. Most, if not all, of the counties are offering significant grant dollars to further this work. Watershed districts are supporting the way they can. Like I said, we're working more on that water quality piece, which is the nutrients and carb. Lake associations, DNR, and mostly county and lake associations are working on the vegetative piece of it. So the curly leaf and the milfoil and zebra mussels. So if I don't see any other questions in a minute or so, we'll let everyone go a few minutes early.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Really appreciate everything.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy, for joining us and for your contribution. All right, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Olive and Christine, for all the heavy lifting on the technology here.